So I just got out of Costco, and they're actually their shelves are starting to run a little bare. But there is toilet paper. More people are realizing, wow, I am not prepared for any kind of emergency. So it's better to be safe than sorry. Food.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I want you to stop putting food in the trash cans in the bathroom, and in your bedroom, but especially in the bathroom because there's ants in there now. So you've got to start putting your food trash items in the kitchen.
All right.
Please.
Can do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So in last class, sorry, book upside down. Last class we read The Alchemist. All right. So we left off with, where were we? Let me mute this. We left off with the caravan leader announcing that the caravan was going to leave the oasis, right? So the boy had just met with the alchemist. They went out into the desert. The alchemist introduced him a little bit into what alchemy is. And he showed him the snake that he pulled out of the hole and put in the circle, right? So the alchemist has left already. The boy is back in the oasis and things are starting to pick up before we leave. But that night, as he watched the cobra within the circle, the strange horseman with the falcon on his shoulder had spoken of love and treasure, of the woman of the desert, and of his personal legend. "I'm going with you," the boy said, and he immediately felt peace in his heart. "We'll leave tomorrow before sunrise," was the alchemist's only response. The boy spent a sleepless night. 2 hours before dawn, he awoke one of the boys who slept in his tent and asked him to show him where Fatima lived. They went to her tent, and the boy gave his friend enough gold to buy a sheep. Then he asked his friend to go into a tent where Fatima was sleeping and to awaken her and tell her that he was waiting outside. The young Arab did as he was asked and was given enough gold to buy yet another sheep. I forgot to mention, while we are reading, I'll put it in the chat. While we are reading, I want you guys to write 5 different quotes from the reading that you found profound or had questions about. Right. Oops, I said wrote. Should be right. There we go. Right. Okay. "Now leave us alone," said the boy to the young Arab. The Arab returned to his tent to sleep, proud to have helped the counselor of the oasis and happy having enough money to buy himself some sheep. Fatima appeared at the entrance to the tent. The two walked out among the palms. The boy knew that it was a violation of the tradition, but that didn't matter to him now. "I'm going away," he said, "and I want you to know that I'm coming back. I love you because—" "Don't say anything," Fatima interrupted. "One is loved because one is loved. No reason is needed for loving." But the boy continued, "I had a dream and I met with a king. I sold crystal and I crossed the desert, and because the tribes declared war, I went to the well seeking the alchemist. So I love you because the entire universe conspired to help me find you." The two embraced, and it was the first time either had touched each other. "I'll be back," the boy said. "Before this, I always looked at the desert with longing," said Fatima. "Now it will be with hope. My father went away one day, but he returned to my mother, and he has always come back since then." They said nothing else. They walked a bit farther among the palms. And then the boy left her at the entrance to her tent. "I'll return just as your father came back to your mother," she said. He saw that Fatima's eyes were filled with tears. "You're crying." "I'm a woman of the desert," she said, averting her face. "But above all, I am a woman." Fatima went back to her tent, and when daylight came, she went out to do the chores she had done for years. But everything had changed. The boy was no longer at the oasis, and the oasis would never again have the same meaning it had only yesterday. It would no longer be a place with 50,000 palm trees and 300 wells, where the pilgrims arrived, relieved at the end of their long journeys. From that day on, the oasis would be an empty place for her. From that day on, it was the desert that would be important. She would look to it every day and would try to guess which star the boy was following in search of his treasure. She would have to send her kisses on the wind, hoping that the wind would touch the boy's face and would tell him that she was alive, that she was waiting for him. A woman awaiting a courageous man in search of his treasure. From that day on, the desert would represent only one thing to her, the hope of his return. Don't think about what you've left behind, the alchemist said to the boy as they began to ride across the sands of the desert. Everything is written in the soul of the world, and there it will stay forever. Men dream more about coming home than about leaving, the boy said. He was already reaccustomed to the desert silence. If what one finds is made of pure matter, it will never spoil, and one can always come back. If what you had found was only a moment of light, like the explosion of a star, you would find nothing on your return. So he says, if what one finds is made of pure matter, it will never spoil, and one can always come back. So he's talking about the love for Fatima, right? He knows that the boy is in love with a girl that he had to leave behind. And so what he's telling him basically is like it's a star, right? It's like a moment of light and there's an explosion, right? If it's meant to be, something will be left behind. So if this love is meant to be, when he returns, if he returns, then they'll still be in love, right? She'll be waiting for him. The man was speaking the language of alchemy, but the boy knew that he was referring to Fatima. It was difficult not to think about what he had left behind. The desert was an endless monotony. The desert with its endless monotony put him to dreaming. The boy could still see the palm trees, the wells, and the face of the woman he loved. He could see the Englishman at his experiments and the camel driver who was a teacher without realizing it. Maybe the alchemist has never been in love, the boy thought. The alchemist rode in front with the falcon on his shoulder. The boy knew the language of the desert well, and whenever they stopped, he flew off in search of game. On the first day, he returned with a rabbit, and on the second, with 2 birds. At night, they spread their sleeping gear and kept their fires hidden. The desert nights were cold and were becoming darker and darker as the phases of the moon passed. They went on for a week, speaking only of precautions they needed to follow in order to avoid the battles between the tribes. The war continued, and at times the wind carried the sickly smell of blood. Battles had been fought nearby, and the wind reminded the boy that there was a language of omens, always ready to show him what his eyes failed to observe. On the 7th day, the alchemist decided to make camp earlier than usual. The falcon flew off to find game, and the alchemist offered his water container to the boy. You are almost at the end of your journey, said the alchemist. I congratulate you for having pursued your personal legend. And you told me nothing along the way, said the boy. I thought you were going to teach me some of the things you know. A while ago, I rode through the desert with a man who had books on alchemy, but I wasn't able to learn anything from him. There's only one way to learn, the alchemist answered. It's through action. Everything you need to know, you have learned through your journey. You need to learn only one thing more. The boy wanted to know what that was, but the alchemist was searching the horizon, looking for the falcon. Why are you called the alchemist? Because that's what I am. And what went wrong with other alchemists? What went wrong when other alchemists tried to make gold and were unable to do so? They were looking only for gold, his companion answered. They were seeking the treasure of their personal legend without wanting to actually live out the personal legend. What is it that I still need to know? The boy asked. But the alchemist continued to look at the horizon, and finally the falcon returned with their meal. They dug a hole and lit their fire in it, so that the light of the flames would not be seen. I am an alchemist simply because I am an alchemist, he said, as he prepared the meal. I learned the science from my grandfather, who learned from his father, and so on, back on the creation of the world. In those times, the master work could be written simply on an emerald, but men began to reject simple things and to write tracts, interpretations, and philosophical studies. They also began to feel that they knew a better way than others had. Yet the emerald tablet is still alive today. What was written on the emerald tablet, the boy wanted to know. The alchemist began to draw in the sand and completed his drawing in less than 5 minutes. As he drew, the boy thought of the old king and the plaza where they had met that day. It seemed as if it had taken place years and years ago. This was what was written on the emerald tablet, said the alchemist, when he finished. The boy tried to read what was written in the sand. It's a code, said the boy, a bit disappointed. It looks like what I saw in the Englishman's book. No, the alchemist answered. It's like the flight of these two hawks. It cannot be understood by reason alone. The emerald tablet is a direct passage to the soul of the world. The wise men understood that this natural world is only an image and a copy of paradise. The existence of this world is simply a guarantee that there's an existence of a world that is perfect. God created the world so that through its visible objects, men could understand his spiritual teachings and the marvels of his wisdom. That's what I mean by action. Should I understand the emerald tablet? The boy asked. Perhaps if you were in a laboratory of alchemy, this would be a right time to study the best way to understand the emerald tablet. But you are in the desert, so immerse yourself in it. The desert will give you an understanding of the world. In fact, anything on the face of the earth will do that. You don't even have to understand the desert. All you have to do is contemplate a simple grain of sand, and you will see in it all the marvels of creation. How do I immerse myself in the desert? Listen to your heart. It knows all things because it came from the soul of the world, and it will one day return there. They crossed the desert for another 2 days in silence. The alchemists had become much more cautious because they were approaching the area where the most violent battles were being waged. As they moved along, the boy tried to listen to his heart. It's not easy to do in earlier times. His heart had always been ready to tell its story. But lately, that wasn't true. There had been times when his heart spent hours telling of its sadness, and other times it became so emotional over the desert sunrise that the boy had to hide his tears. His heart beat fastest when it spoke to the boy of treasure, and more slowly when the boy stared entranced at the endless horizons of the desert. But his heart was never quiet, even when the boy and the alchemist had fallen into silence. Why do we have to listen to our hearts? The boy asked when they had made camp that day. Because wherever your heart is, that is where you'll find your treasure. But my heart is agitated, the boy said. It has its dreams, it gets emotional, and it becomes passionate over a woman of the desert. It asks anything of me, and it keeps me from sleeping many nights when I'm thinking about her. Well, that's good. Your heart is alive. Keep listening to what it has to say. During the next 3 days, the two travelers passed by a number of armed tribesmen and saw others on the horizon. The boy's heart began to speak of fear. It told him stories that it heard from the soul of the world, stories of men who sought to find their treasure and never succeeded. Sometimes it frightened the boy who had no idea that he might not find his treasure or that he might die there in the desert. At other times, it told the boy that it was satisfied. It had found love and riches. My heart is a traitor, the boy said to the alchemist. When they had paused to rest the horses, it doesn't want me to go on. That makes sense, the alchemist answered. Naturally, it's afraid that in pursuing your dream, you might lose everything you've won. Right? So he's saying that he's fearful or he's having second thoughts about continuing his journey, right? And he's saying that it's his heart, right? His heart is being a traitor, right? His heart is telling him, maybe I don't want this anymore, right? But what it is really is, it's his heart trying to protect him, right? He's afraid that if he were to fail, if he were to continue on this journey and he were to fail and he never found treasure, he's worried that everything that came before, all of the lessons he learned, everything he did would be for nothing, right? But we know from the teachings of this book that it's not so much about the destination, right? It's not so much about whether he gets there and he finds the gold or the treasure, right? It's more so about all the different lessons and things that he's experienced, right? Through his actions, he's experienced the soul of the world, or the lessons and the teachings that he's supposed to learn. Well, then, why should I listen to my heart? Because you will never again be able to keep it quiet. Even if you pretend not to have heard what it tells you, it will always be there inside you, repeating to you what you're thinking about life and about the world. You mean I should listen, even if it is treasonous? Treason is a blow that comes unexpectedly. If you know your heart well, it will never be able to do that to you, because you know its dreams and wishes and will know how to deal with them. You will never be able to escape from your heart, so it's better to listen to what it has to say. That way, you'll never have to fear an unanticipated blow. The boy continued to listen to his heart as they crossed the desert. He came to understand his dodges and tricks and to accept it as it was. He lost his fear and forgot about his need to go back to the oasis, because one afternoon, his heart told him that it was happy. Even though I complain sometimes, it said, it's because I am the heart of a person, and people's hearts are that way. People are afraid to pursue their most important dreams because they feel that they don't deserve them or that they are unable to achieve them. We, their hearts, become fearful just thinking of loved ones who go away forever, or of moments that could have been good or weren't, or of treasures that might have been found but forever hidden in the sands. Because when these things happen, we suffer terribly. My heart is afraid that it will never have to suffer, the boy told the alchemist one night as they looked up at the moonless sky. Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity. Right? So he's saying that if you're on your journey, your path to in life, and what your treasure is, you're in search of your treasure, right? There really isn't any suffering on the way, because all the suffering that you do encounter is really just a lesson, right? It's something positive to teach you. So in a way, there's not really suffering, there's only lessons. Every second of the search is an encounter with God, the boy told his heart. When I have been truly searching for my treasure, every day has been luminous, because I've known that every hour was part of the dream that I would find it. When I've been truly searching for my treasure, I've discovered things along the way I never would have seen had I not had the courage to try things that seemed impossible for a shepherd to achieve. So, his heart was quiet for an entire afternoon. That night, the boy slept deeply, and then when he woke, his heart began to tell him the things that came from the soul of the world. It said that all people who are happy have God within them, and that happiness could be found in a grain of sand from the desert, as the alchemist had said. Because a grain of sand is a moment of creation, and the universe has taken millions of years to create it, everyone on earth has a treasure that awaits him, his heart said. We, people's hearts, seldom say much about those treasures, because people no longer want to go in search of them. We speak of them only to children. Later, we simply let life proceed in its own direction toward its own fate. But unfortunately, very few follow the path laid out for them, the path to their personal legends and to happiness. Most people see the world as a threatening place, and because they do, the world turns out, indeed, to be a threatening place. All right, so we're going to stop here. Okay, so go ahead and those different quotes, the 5 different quotes, I want you to write them down, and then you are going to interpret them, right? So it doesn't have to be right. You don't have to have a for sure answer. If you don't know what something means, I want you to just try your best to define it, right? So if you have a quote and you write it down, right? Right. So from then on, the boy understood his heart. He asked it, "Please never stop speaking to me." He asked that. When he wandered far from his dreams, his heart pressed him and sound the alarm. His heart pressed him and sound the alarm. The boy swore that every time he heard the alarm, he would heed its message. Right? So I could write that quote down, and then I can just explain what I think it means or what I interpret it as, right? There's no right or wrong answers. Once you do that, you can send it to my email in seashoreacademy.org. You can send it to me, and then hopefully next class we'll be able to discuss them. So if you have any questions, you can just email me. My email again is in the chat, jordan@seashoreacademy.org. Thank you. Have a good day.